So hey, my name is Franco. I'm a third-year biomedical engineering student here at Case Western.
Hello, my name's Ixchel, and I'm his classmate.
And I'd like to introduce you to Asclepii. We're a wound healing R&D pipeline focused specifically on diabetic foot ulcers. And one of our biggest concerns is the growing global problem that diabetes has become. In fact, I'd like you to raise your hand if you know anyone with diabetes. That is, I did not expect that many. But anyway, so more than 1 in 3 Americans either have diabetes or pre-diabetes in the United States. That's over 130 million people. And each of these people suffer complications that it can essentially cause chronic skin wounds. And those are just wounds that don't go through the general, regular processes of healing. These wounds, if left untreated, can essentially lead to very severe consequences such as amputation or death. And that affects 14 to 24% of all DFU patients.
This has created a $9.7 billion problem and a massive burden on our healthcare systems. And this is only taking into consideration patients that are facing either amputation or death. So these are people that desperately need solutions. If this number seems a little high, it's because of a number of reasons. First, a $4,000 mean cost per wound and a 40% chance that the wound will recur by the 1-year mark. All of this, along with the growth rate expected for diabetes, adds up to create a CAGR of 6.22%.
I'd like to apologize for the weird formatting, but we'll continue. So there's a pressing need for solutions that can reduce hospital operating costs specifically. The gold standard, which is compression treatment, is too hands-on and can drive to around $11,000 per wound. The problem with this, specifically with this high cost, is essentially the high attention that it requires from physicians and nurses alike. The big players in the market have been taking use of the reimbursement landscape, with insurance companies and creating drug delivery ointments and scaffolds that can essentially drive down the cost around $4,000 per wound. However, this has also opened the landscape for startups to be able to participate in this, and there's still a very high need for smart interdisciplinary solutions and that can essentially reduce the amount of in-hospital time. In fact, one of our products has been able to drive down the cost to around $300 per wound. And in fact, I wish I could stand in front of it, but I'd like to introduce to you one of the first cellularized therapies of Latin America that we're trying to introduce to U.S. hospitals. The license is already in negotiation with the Universidad de Valparaíso in Chile, and we've tested over 200 patients with successful results. These are 200 stories of people who have been literally saved from amputation or death, and in US dollars, that's around $800,000 that have been saved. We're also fully funded by a top 5 Latin American research institution called the Tecnológico Monterrey for R&D of a high efficiency, low cost product. In fact, funnily enough, we will both be doing that in this upcoming summer, which is super exciting. So you might be wondering kind of what we are, especially because we're an undergrad, right? So we figured we needed help. Asclepii we essentially partnered with our mentors and friends and people from back home. We're all from Latin America, and we created an R&D network that is introducing this wound care pipeline to the United States. We connect top-notch research institutions that can create patent licenses and joint ventures to startups, incubators, and consultants in over 5 different countries that can essentially help us outline a path to market. And these are then connected to the U.S. government through grants, the regulatory landscape, and essentially sold to U.S. hospitals. In fact, we're already in conversation with university hospitals. With your help, we could be selling to hospitals such as UH by 2025. We already have NIH-approved clinical trials for a low-cost cellular therapy for wound care that is around $300. We're finalizing the negotiation now, and we predict clinical trials in 2024. We already have a GMP-approved facility in Costa Rica that could manufacture this solution, and we predict an initial revenue stream by 2025. If this works in one hospital, we believe it can work in more. And essentially, we'd like to scale by 2026. But truthfully, in Asclepii, the power is in the partnerships. We have over 65 years of cumulative experience in our directory board. These are directors. With 3 international wound care patents, 2 of which are pending, an IPO, and a total co-founding of 9 startups, not to mention some names such as Citibank, McKinsey, and KPMG, and MIT. With your help, we'll achieve key milestones. We predict around $5,000 to bring the first product to market to cover IP and legal costs and some grant applications, and $10,000 to fund two crew students, me and Excel actually, to go and actually do the research, which all the research dollars already funded and paid for by the Tecnológico Institute. This will also lead grant applications. Thank you.
Okay, perfect timing.
5 minutes exactly?
Yep, exactly.
Thank you, everyone.
200 stories, great line. Not patience, but saying 200 stories.
Thank you.
Your instincts are spectacular.
No, I'm just standing here. With help.
And the second point is, don't overlook the much larger opportunity, and you've kind of touched on it, to serve as a gateway between Latin America medical solutions and the U.S. That's got to be enormous, way bigger than what you're doing is important and large, but the gateway opportunity could be much, much larger.
Thank you. That's our goal. We're all from South America. So.
I mean, I think that's spectacular.
I really appreciate you saying that.
I'm not a medical professional.
Totally fine.
So I'm just curious how much, with a new therapy like this, how much education of your potential customer becomes kind of a burden for your sales process?
I'd like to say it's so easy. A 16-year-old could do it. Oh, no, it's funny because actually that I started this. That you see that picture over there? You can barely see it, but I actually have a school uniform on. And that was the first time I ever developed a prototype. And I thought, oh, it's super hard. It requires this very big barrier of knowledge. And truthfully, I don't know if you know what a lyophilizer is. I didn't, but all you need is essentially a couple materials, a protocol that you follow, a couple of minutes, and you put it and you dry it, and you just to answer your question, there's no barrier of knowledge to effectuate the therapy itself, unless you're applying the patient's own cells, which is a different story. And that is truthfully something we still have to work out if we're going to sell it as a service or if we're going to sell it as a know-how, because the patent we have is over the cellular therapy. So we have the patent on the know-how and how to put cells on this matrix, the little sponge you put up there. So that sponge, you can put cells on it and it essentially empowers your own cells in order to heal your wound. So we're still going to actually figure out if, we sell this as a service or we sell it as a product itself where we can just sell a little piece, a protocol to a hospital and they can do it in a hospital. Yes?
So then what's the basis of, help me understand, you expect to be revenue positive by 2025. Is there a time difference between your two channel options and
Yes.
how do you expect revenues to, and then do you expect revenues to still pan out regardless of which channel you choose?
Sorry to confuse you. Those are two parallel projects happening. So essentially the first project, and by the way, if I've seen further, it was by standing on the shoulders of giants. By all means, we don't do this alone. We have research teams in different universities, but the first project has already been happening for around 10 years. In fact, it's already been approved for phase 2 clinical trials. So that's why we predict this initial revenue stream so soon, per se. Also, thanks to the great connection in ThinkBox and to the UH and Cleveland Clinic and different local hospitals, the goal is that we can get essentially accelerated in one of the hospital megaspheres.
As you look at this particular landscape, what are some of the risks that you all have really evaluated around bringing this to market?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And there's always risks. So one of the biggest risks we envision specifically is we are planning on going beyond the insurance landscape, meaning we're trying to create a solution that is cheap enough that you don't need to have insurance in order to apply it. So that the goal is to be able to really make it as accessible as possible. This is mainly because, first of all, around half of America doesn't have even $2,000 in the bank account for an emergency or even access to quality insurance sometimes for healthcare. But one of the risks is that maybe it's not as straightforward in order to just get it approved and sell it beyond insurance. Another risk is, for example, corporate war with the big players that I don't know if they appear in the slide. Here, for me, it looks great. But, as you see some big titles here, Medtronic, Smith & Nephew, and 3M have a lot of hospital deals, and that might also get complicated. But luckily we do have, and I would like to speak a bit about those, but if you see this, guys, the PBW, they're actually experts, consultants in wound care that essentially have equity stake in the company and that advise us to go forward. So we want to walk together, and we don't want to compete. We want to collaborate in all these situations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.